But I learned something new this morning that I'll share with you all now. You will probably be familiar with what's on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. I did have to get my 21-year-old to remind me what it's called, a QR code, which my colleague Callum has cleverly embedded into this slide. I did try it earlier, but I'm going to try it again now. I just, with my camera, hover over it, it opens a web page and takes me to something called Padlet.com on this occasion. And for the purposes of this presentation, if you're watching it live, it takes you to a chat where you can type in any questions you have to ask us during this session, or I'm sure we will leave it open for a few working days, I think for the rest of this week, for people that are watching the presentation in record. So you can use the normal system in this Teams presentation. You should see in the functionality you can raise your hands, perhaps you can do a thumbs down, and also please feel free to use the chat functionality. But what will be fantastic is if you do have questions, suggestions, words you might like to say, pop into the QR code and we'll be doing our best to show the questions at the end, but also more importantly for anyone who is watching this presentation recorded, you'll get to see the types of questions that have been submitted during the presentation. Right, I think I can see a few more people have come into the room, so I think I'll make a start. Callum, Tara, does that sound okay?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Fabulous. So as you can see, the presentation will be recorded. So if we've not done so already, we'll be clicking record now. Thanks so much to those of you who are joining us live. We have lots of different meetings in our calendars and we appreciate this invitation only went out last week. But the purpose was to record a session that Aurora staff colleagues can watch at their leisure. So we thought, well, we may as well invite anyone who can join us on the day to the live presentation. But if you are watching this recorded, hello, thanks for listening. And as you might have heard already, we will be circulating this presentation recorded with the questions and hopefully their answers latterly to share more widely with our Aurora staff community. So just to show you what's in store for this brief presentation, we'll hopefully only talk for 25 minutes, so there's plenty of time for questions. Naturally, we'll let you know what the updates are for the coming year and give you an indication of some of the key events through the year. And then I'm going to invite my colleague to give you the full detail on this year's two schemes, Champions and Ambassador schemes. We went live for applications yesterday, so really delighted about that. We'll chat you through the application process. And then what this session is aimed to do, rather than talk about the schemes so much, actually, how can we as Aurora University staff really take on board this fantastic resource we have available for us this year? So with improvements from last year, hopefully by the end of seeing this session, plus a written guide that we've prepared for you, it will give you a good indication of how we can really maximise our use of this resource this year. We'll close obviously with what are the next steps for all of us, and as I say, hopefully answering your questions. So what's new for the coming year? So just a very basic outline. It was the inaugural year last year of the Aurora Student Champions scheme, an opportunity for students to volunteer to give some hours to the works of Aurora. The schemes now, which began obviously only a year ago, are a key set of initiatives encouraging students in the Aurora University to get involved in conversations that are important to us as Aurora universities. So much enthusiasm from our students. They're caring, they're ambitious. I can see Anne from the UEA Students' Union here. I know we speak for our student councils as well. And this is not just for themselves. They are interested in representing the student voice. They're interested in their peers' education and obviously for future generations to come. So we've got a great marriage here with the objectives of Aurora. The schemes, whether our students are in Aurora Network, Alliance universities, work with those ambitions of Aurora, and of course the work of the Student Council to provide that necessary student voice, the contributions that we really need to our work, helping us and them engage across a number of different topics that we're all engaged in, and collectively sharing their ambitions for the future of higher education. But as I mentioned in the first slide, our role, we have a really key role to play in supporting our students. And actually, it's really crucial that we help our students learn how they can get engaged with us. We had lots of underutilised resource last year, and so we're really hoping this year, by explaining to staff how we should perhaps guide and brief our students, introduce them to our work streams, allow them to invite them to have a voice in our working group meetings. We really think we'll be able to encourage more participation from the students to be able to contribute this year. And it's really important that we stay in touch with the Aurora staff community throughout the year. UEA, the University of East Anglia, is administering the scheme again this year. Happy to do so following the inaugural year, because we really want to help embed all the feedback that came from last year. It's by no means UEA taking the decisions on how the scheme is run, so we really actively invite members of staff to help improve the scheme for future universities that will be engaged. On that note, I'll just get my colleague Tara Welsh, who you may know is actively engaged in Aurora activities and of course for Aurora UEA, to say hello. So Tara plays a key role in administering this scheme. And also you may be familiar with Callum Perry. He was last year's Aurora Student Council President and was championing the birth of the Aurora Student Champion Scheme last year. Really delighted that as Callum has stepped back into his student role this year, he is our student ambassador who will be helping us administer the scheme. So thank you and hello to Callum. Really importantly, as I'm sure you would imagine, in administering a scheme, it's wise, and I would recommend this for any future university getting involved, to use a generic email address. That means when Callum is in his studies and Tara is at the Aurora biannual, there's a generic address. So please take a note of that, if that's okay. Right, so what's new for this year? There is a student handbook. You can read lots of information. As you'll see at the bottom of most of our slides, there is the web page. So I'm just going to go very, very briefly on this to bring everybody up to speed. So a much more streamlined administration of the process for all stakeholders, that is our staff and our students. Students apply through one application form, they attend one training session, all of them can come to any of our ad hoc drop-ins, general Q&A sessions with the students, all have the same processes to follow in terms of checking in. There are slightly different commitments for both schemes that we'll touch on in a moment, but we really want to give all of our students, regardless of which scheme they choose to get involved in, all of the opportunities. So hopefully you'll see that has changed this year. During last year, at the suggestion of Case Kuganar and the central office, we had our fantastic pool of champions who had committed 20, 30 hours for the academic year, but we knew there was a resource there that was already taking place, perhaps in our own universities, where our own students were just getting a few hours here and there, perhaps talking about Aurora in the classroom at a biannual. And so in February of this calendar year, we tentatively launched very softly the Ambassador Scheme, and this is now fully embedded for this year. So there's concurrently, as well as the Champion Scheme, the brand new Aurora Student Ambassador Scheme. It's got a badge award structure, helping students evidence their skills effectively, but actually is slightly less onerous for them. So we really hope this is a much more meaningful way for us to use our own students in our own universities. And we'll touch on that again in a moment too. What we really learned from the Champion Scheme, and we're thrilled with the feedback that we had with those that have got involved to help us improve the structure is that it was a bit too much. 40 hours felt daunting. So actually we've broken that down now so that the champions have a staggered approach. They can go for bronze, but actually they can go for gold if they like. All students have different academic and extracurricular commitments, so we're really hoping to add inclusivity to the project this year. We're also going to allocate students to the task teams. Last year they were asked which group they wanted to get involved in, and that didn't necessarily marry with the resource that our task team leads wanted or needed. So actually we're going to allocate students to student champions to the task groups, and you will be able to get them engaged in any way that you like. They are there to represent the student voice. They are already specifying through their application that they are interested in the objectives of Aurora. So we hope that you will use them as you see fit, but in order to add that student voice, but also to use their willing resource. We've changed the activity where students collaborate with other students, so they will now get involved in a group project rather than a peer pen pal activity. And what's been fantastic with the development of the Aurora Competencies Framework and the support of Sabine, and I previously mentioned Case, we are embedding much more so the Aurora Competencies Framework, so that our students have a stronger reflection on what's important to us within our group of universities. And the final point I wanted to say, so obviously I've mentioned that UEA has offered to administer the scheme again this year. I think what's really important, and why there was a decision to launch a structured scheme in the first place, is to ensure the embedded longevity of students in our work. Yes, that's happening, of course, but actually that connection between us as members of staff working in our working groups, ensuring that students are getting involved at the right time. Moreover, the Aurora Student Council and its fantastic work wanted more students to support its work. The schemes help this. But also, of course, as students move into another year group, lots of the fantastic initiatives that have developed in an academic year perhaps then slow down and more new initiatives come. But what we really hope is by having a staff and university administering the schemes, it will aid the longevity of these projects that our students are initiating. The idea is that the administration of the schemes will rotate each year, and so next year it will be another university. So a fantastic opportunity in the coming year to get involved in, do you know what, how else could we change, improve, adapt these schemes? How else might we get involved in how these schemes are administered, ready for the next university, or perhaps a couple of universities to get involved in. Right, now for the nitty gritty. So I think I might have another slide with some key dates for you. And of course, we'll circulate this with the notes as it comes later. But I think now if we move on to some detail about the schemes, the Aurora Student Champion Scheme and the Aurora Student Ambassador Scheme, I'm going to pass over to Callum.
Thanks, Alex, and hi everyone. Sorry you can't see me because I'm sharing my screen. It means that I can't physically interact with you on the screen, but hopefully you can see and hear me loud and clear. So I'm just very briefly going to walk you through both of the schemes and really just show what Alex has already talked about in a visual representation, so you can see how these are going to play out throughout the year. So the Champion Scheme, as Alex has mentioned, is sort of designed for students that really want to build on new skills and evidence for their employers. It is a committed scheme, and by that we mean more students will have to commit more hours to this scheme as opposed to the Ambassador Scheme, which we'll talk about in a second. So there's up to 40 hours of requirement here, and that's the difference from last year to this year, is that it's up to 40 hours rather than 40 hours required of commitment. And we've put that emphasis into one section of the Champion Scheme so that students feel they're able to complete the scheme much more successfully, as opposed to focusing on the amount of hours and maybe contact time they have to have in the scheme. So they can choose which level of commitment suits them. There's still 4 sections, so we've not changed the scheme too much. But in terms of representation, we're asking students to commit between 20 and 40 hours of experience in that area. So we're asking them to record training sessions they might have been to, drop-in sessions they might have been to. We're asking them to record any Alliance work package representation, any university level representation, and any work they've done off the back of their own initiatives. So you can see here how, you know, the staff in the Aurora universities, in the Aurora central office, play a huge role in making sure that students are able to fulfill those hours. And I would say one of the things that students really reflected on was not being able to know where to go and where to be signposted last year to receive that support to make those hours up. So we think this is a much more achievable way of obtaining the hours, and with your support as staff, we feel as an administrative team we'll be able to helpfully and successfully guide students through that process this year. If students succeed more than 40 hours, then they can be considered for a more prestigious Platinum Award. And again, those will be in the forms of certificates, and with the Champion scheme, we will still be providing the reference for students so they can evidence their skills to employers. We've changed, as Alex mentioned, the pen pal activity to a more collaborative project, and this really is to streamline the process and to support students in comparison to last year. So what we found was students were being assigned a pen pal, and there was a lot of stress and anxiety from students around having to rely on one other person to be able to provide the overall group task and group project last year. So this year we will allocate students to a group, and they will be given a topic which they will have to discuss, and it will be about comparing and contrasting their experiences in education and their wider student experience at their universities. So we hope what we'll be able to start doing is beginning those conversations and encouraging more conversations where students are actually talking about their educational experiences, their student experiences, and working out where the similarities and differences are, where best practices, and also then providing us with some ideas about how Aurora might be able to benefit the student population going forward. So again, looking at students individually, but also looking at the Aurora student community, which we're trying to really put an emphasis on this year. We've also maintained the academic skills section, but we've moved away from asking students to reflect on a piece of academic writing they did in one of their modules in their curriculum, because students were concerned naturally about obviously evidencing things in that reflection or providing us with information that was being submitted for a piece of work, and having now separated out the distinctions between providing us a new piece of academic writing or duplicating a piece of academic writing. We've removed the issues around plagiarism, collusion, all of the things about academic integrity, which we know institutions will have different approaches and cultural variations on. So this year, instead of asking students to reflect or provide us with some writing that's already been previously done, we're asking them to write a new piece of academic writing. And this should be in the form of a blog or an article. It should be academically referenced, and it should be focused on a topic from Aurora that interests those students. And that's around 100 to 500 words. And we have seen from last year that some students chose to write a blog and provided some really, really interesting perspectives on different topics, which were actually published on the Aurora website. So we know that that process works. And the final section is on personal development and reflection. And as Alex mentioned, we've put a greater emphasis on personal development and reflection in this section. And we'll be doing that by providing a structured template, which is collaborated with through the Aurora competencies framework. So we'll be asking students questions and prompting them in a way that allows us to tap into some of those competency framework and our understandings and ideas, but also allows us to evaluate our own scheme's effectiveness. So we're trying to do a dual purpose model here with that personal development and reflection task. So that gives you the four areas, and again, you've got the barcode there to the Padlet board or the chat function, and if you've got any questions about that, I would really welcome those in just a moment. We've then got the ambassador scheme, which, as Alex mentioned, is launching officially this year for the first time. And some staff may remember that last year we got our ambassadors to do things like glossary work. So we asked them to start looking for key definitions and terminology that was related to the Aurora Alliance and network. We also asked them to provide short written welcomes to students in their own university to start raising the profile of Aurora. So it was very ad hoc. It was very bitty. And so this year, what we've decided to do is standardize this process by also providing them with a 3-stage process, which they can dip in and out of, which will give them different levels of recognition. So it's called the AA Challenge, and as the sort of subtitle here shows, it's big impact, hopefully, with the work we're asking them to do, but with little time that's needed, or less time than the champion scheme would require. So students can dip in and out of this. If they only want to try and secure their bronze badge, they can do that for the whole of the academic year. If they'd like to go for gold, then they could go through all 3 stages and secure all 3 badges, and that will come with a certificate for each of those stages. So for the bronze badge, we're asking students to write 2 blogs for us on Aurora topics. The difference here being they don't have to be academically referenced. They can be talking about their own personal opinions of a topic. It can be about an experience they might have had, or it can be referenced academically with articles. It might have been they've seen a particular educational journal that has noted something that's of particular importance to them or rings true with their educational experience, and how might they respond to that in a critical and evaluative way. So we're asking them to write 2 blogs to receive their bronze badge. We are then asking for the silver badge for them to create another medium of communication. So we're asking them to create a vlog, a video blog, for those of you that aren't aware, which it requires them to talk to another student or peer. So it could be somebody that they know, could be another ambassador, could be a champion, about their experiences of higher education and how they would improve their experience. So this really could be an interview. So it could be asking the student pre-prepared questions about their own experiences. It could be about talking about a particular topic that is relevant to their campus or to the wider higher educational sector. So it's really asking them to engage critically with another person, to think about ideas and to respond to somebody else's perspective so they can have free-flowing debate and academic conversation. And the final badge for the gold is a collaborative project. And this is where we would really like to see some collaboration between both of our schemes. So we would ask our student champions to join forces with our student ambassadors to set up an event at the university that there is home institution, and to promote the work and topics of Aurora. And we've seen this previously in the student council work, actually, where students have gone away and they've done little conversation cafes. They've held a student council debate at their university. So we're really asking students to think creatively about planning and implementing and evaluating a project, and that will be with student champions at the same time. So really encouraging cross collaboration, but in their own university. And this is the difference really between about the ambassadors and the champion scheme. The ambassador scheme is there to benefit the home institution, to raise awareness and the profile of Aurora within their own university community. The champions are contributing to task teams and work packages, which means that they're representing on a wider scale for Aurora. What we're asking our ambassadors to do is to still take the essence of Aurora, but promote it through different mediums to their own students at their institution, to start to increase the awareness of Aurora, to start to increase the excitement of student opportunity for, that Aurora can bring, to hopefully ensure the longevity of the schemes going forward. So I think now I'm going to stop there for a second. I think I'm passing back to Alex to just have a look at the application process. I believe I might be sharing my screen as well to show you the application. So I'll hand back over to you, Alex, for a moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Callum. So the stage that we're at now, applications went live yesterday, which is really exciting. After this session, we will be circulating the presentation and the recording with the staff briefing notes to everyone that's attended. But you'll also find a separate email comes to key stakeholders in Aurora, and we really would love you to help cascade this to students in your university. So in the main, we'll be sending this to institutional coordinators, leads and co-leads of work package groups, student council members, of course, the central office colleagues, and any contacts that we have. So forgive us in advance if you receive the message twice. but we're ready now for students to apply to either the Ambassador or the Champions scheme. We've popped the web link in the chat, so do have a look yourselves to see what our students will be getting involved in, but also if you're interested, you can see the application form that students are asked to reply to. We are open until midnight on Sunday the 17th of October, which means we will begin assessing the applications during the week commencing 18th. Callum, the slide has, thank you, if you can put the slide back up. So that whole week will be when we look through through the slides. Thanks very much, Callum. So this is what the application form looks like. And it's, as we mentioned earlier, much simpler, really ensuring the students understand what's in it for them. I don't think we'll be able to go so far without completing it, but do take a look yourselves if you're interested. There's just 2 sections if students want to become an ambassador, a separate 2 sections if they want to become a champion. So yeah, do take a look if that's of interest to you. So as I say, we will be looking through those applications in the week commencing 18th of October. And rather than go through a robust selection process, we've streamlined, you'll see what we're asking the students to put forward for. Of course, we'll be checking that they are an Aurora student at your university, so we'll be checking that either by them having a university email address in the first instance, but we will also be sending the details to each institutional coordinator, so you just have a list of those students and of course check them as you deem appropriate. But as long as the student is committing to what's specified in the application form, which does mention things like using their narrative work or photographs in Aurora publicity, Aurora activity, so that model release form side is taken care of, and then of course we would love them to progress onto the scheme. We will probably on Friday the 22nd of October, but definitely towards the end of that week, we'll let you know the students that are representing the schemes from your university. We'll probably cascade that as one whole sheet via the central office, and then if you allow us a little bit more time, we'll break that down into per university, but just bear with us that week. It will depend on the excellent work we will do in promoting the schemes, and we'll just see what the level of interest is like and how many applications we need to get through. We're running a live training session, a bit like this session here, on the Monday the 25th, for the purposes of recording it like we're doing here, but students will have a week during which they need to have completed that training and then to formally progress onto the scheme, having been offered a place subject to completing the training. And then the most important part, and this is why we wanted to cascade this briefing for staff at this point in the cycle, we would love you, in particular institutional coordinators and work package leads or representatives from work packages, to contact those students that are allocated to you as soon as possible. I think if Tara, Callum and I could put our finger on the question we heard most often last year, it was, when will I hear from my allocated work group? So, you know, let's really make sure we're using our students. And we've set ourselves a little ambition. Perhaps we can be competitive between our institutions, who will, which university will have contributed the most student hours by the end of the year. But actually, the aim, let's all try and recruit 10, 12 students from our institutions this year. That means 100, more than 100 students will be engaged this year. That will be just fantastic. And what we'd like to do is stand on a soapbox at the autumn biannual and share with the whole Aurora community how many students are engaged in this year. So really welcome your support with that. Right, next slide, please. Fabulous. So what do we need you, our Aurora student staff community, to do to really help this scheme work? So this year, the Aurora Student Champions will be assigned to 2 task teams, and you'll be advised who your students are with their home university and their contact email address. We are going to circulate a student guide, but also there'll be a crib sheet for how, just some recommendations as to how you might get in touch with students. This is based on feedback from staff and students last year. Please contact your students how you would like to, but I think many of us will find this a quick useful pointer for how to get in touch with our students and help them feel comfortable. We are making sure the students that are taking part in the schemes are allowing us to share their contact details with you, so they know that their own university will know that they're engaged, as well as other universities. Obviously, that's important in terms of data protection, and we can't say more strongly about you contacting your students as soon as possible. It doesn't need to be a standalone introductory meeting, but if you're inviting them to a work package meeting and there's 12 other people in the room and you all know each other really well, it's probably quite daunting as a new member of staff. So as a student, do introduce them. Perhaps don't expect them to give a presentation, but we know from last year some students were invited to work groups but sort of not actively asked to engage in a session. So let's really help them settle in as best we can. Plus, if there's an agenda, if there's something that might be useful for them to read in advance, please give them access to further information. I guess as we would for any new member of staff, think of our students in that respect. Just key points of contact for questions. We really want to ensure the students have an opportunity to ask a work package lead if they're not sure of anything. But for our staff here, please just get in contact with us if we've not made anything clear, or your allocated students aren't responding to you. Hopefully you can just spend a minute just letting us know rather than waiting. We know from last year that the students are eager and keen. We'll be addressing that to them, making sure they respond to you. So let's do our best to respond back to them. Next slide, please. Okay, Callum, back to you for this one.
Thanks, Alex. So yeah, as Alex has just mentioned, we're aiming to provide all staff with a helpful side of A4 with examples and prompters about how you might get students involved and engaged in your task teams or your projects. We know from last year, having spoken to lots of staff, that actually not only were students waiting to hear from task team leaders, but also when they were in those sessions, task team leaders were expecting engagement from those students, which was sometimes maybe short-lived. And we need to be really honest about that sometimes the engagement we want from students is not where we would like it to be, and particularly with the challenges that come with a virtual and widespread international network and alliance, it becomes very difficult. So what I've tried to do here for you is put this into a slight matrix of online and active, and online and passive, and in-person active, and in-person and passive ways in which you might want to start engaging your students. And I won't go through everything here for you, but you can see the variety of different tools and resources that might be at your own fingertips, or you might want to be able to create, or you might want to collaborate with other universities on to engage students across the 2 schemes in with you. So for example, you might want to be really online and active, so that might be being present at some of our drop-in sessions. It might be actually meeting with your champions and ambassadors to give them support, or using online polls to gain very short insights into how the ambassadors and champions are getting on in your institution or in the Aurora Alliance and Network wider. You might actually find that you haven't got as much time to dedicate more active forms of online activity. So You might decide that sending out regular emails, online communication, just to check in with students is the best way. Providing something like a Padlet board that we've done today via the VR code, the QR code, sorry, so you're able to get the students to ask questions that you can actually contribute answers to in your own time. You might offer to pass on any blogs or any positive news stories that students have created to the people that actually can put them out there. Or you might find that you're able to do more in-person work as we're starting to come out of some of the pandemic restrictions. So you may be able to get involved with giving students actual opportunities to speak at events, or doing a speech at one of their events yourself. You might also be able to provide useful resources to students, or print them out and ask them if you can help create any materials. Maybe you've got some examples of best practice that can be edited. Just really helpful ways in making sure that students can really succeed and progress in the work they want to do. Or you might offer to write a reference after the students have finished to input the success of a student's work. So sometimes students will come to you and ask, could you evidence that I've been doing this work in the scheme? And so providing some materials, some reference to that would be really useful. Or ensuring that, for example, all in-person events have some general communication about the student schemes, not giving it yourself, but actually making sure that there is a slide. I noticed that John has mentioned about providing some generic definitions and examples of what students can expect in both the schemes, and just making sure you've got that information to hand that you can pass out to different people for different events is also another great way of just making sure that the students are at the forefront of being engaged with and are well known. So you can see there that there's lots and lots of opportunities and examples. What I would say as well is that each university has their own methods of engaging with students. And so we would really encourage you to apply some of what you already do in your own universities to engagement with the students of Aurora. So if you are already able to get things out into your local communication channels, if you're already able to identify which events might be good for students to come along to, use your own channels, use your own practices that you're doing in your universities to really get the voice of students and the activity of students out there, and encourage students to come along to those things. They can develop their confidence in speaking to new people and engaging in what is a very exciting but vast network of academics and students alike. So I think I'll leave it there for now, Alex, because that's quite a lot of information, but we will be circulating all of that in the coming days.
Fabulous. Right, so let's just quickly wrap up and then take some questions if we can move to the final slide. So fantastic idea, John. Thank you so much. We will set up a QR code on some kind of promotional material to help students ease of finding out more information. But do please ensure in any communications you cascade to use the web address. You can just quite simply, I've done it myself, search in Google or whichever Chrome medium you use, Aurora Student Schemes, and it does come up. Obviously, you can find it if you're within the Aurora University Aurora web pages as well. The slides will be circulated, and of course that will come with the Aurora staff guide. It's a short 4-page document that'll just really talk through a step-by-step process of how you might get involved with your students in terms of contacting them, including those handy tips, but also actually what you might get your students involved in, just to give you some useful suggestions. As we mentioned, after the closing date at midnight on the 17th of October, we'll start looking through those applications, and we'll aim by the end of that week to let you know the students that have been recruited for you to use from your universities. If they are student ambassadors, these are your tool for your university. I'm very sure the central office will also use the student ambassadors when we need students to answer surveys or to support us with the biannual, but the Aurora student ambassadors belong to you for your university to use for your events. The champions really will be those that are allocated to get involved in more detail with the work groups and the work packages. So it's really important that we use those students and just use this presentation or the guide as a useful aid memoir to distinguish between the two. Right, let's see if the QR code has worked and if there are any questions in there that we can look through. Do obviously keep in touch with us if you're watching this presentation recorded, or you have other questions that are not answered here. Just get in touch with us at aurora.champions@uea.ac.uk. Right, I'm going to take the hand up from Helena, and then I'll start reading some questions here. Helena.
Hi, thanks Alex.
Hi.
Thanks Callum. That was just really fantastic and very thought-provoking and very clear. So I think that's really helpful to start off on this book where, you know, feel like we've got lots of good information. Not necessarily questions that you will be able to answer now, but something to think about. You've clearly done a sort of lessons learned activity, you know, reflecting on what you've done so far and plug that into the plans for this year, so that's great. I just wondered whether you got plans for a kind of deeper evaluation of the impact on student learning, and particularly thinking about sort of developing this idea of intercultural competence that we do sort of talk about a bit in the network, and whether there's anything that we can use as part of the way that the scheme has developed, you know, that helps us to develop that Aurora definition of intercultural competence, and that works in really well with whichever of the work streams is looking at I can't remember the right word for it now, but the sort of the sort of learning outcomes type thing.
Yeah.
And the second sort of part of this question is I just wonder whether you've got any analysis by demographics. Now, that's not a thing that you would probably be able to share because I realise numbers are quite small and we'd obviously have to suppress data. But from an inclusion point of view, I think we'd want to get a sense of over the years of this initiative, which students are participating, because as a network, we do want to have a relationship between, you know, opportunities for intercultural engagement and inclusion and widening participation. So if we haven't started that demographic analysis yet, I'm just thinking, is that something that maybe me and the team at UEA could help with? So I just wonder, well, I guess the main question is about what you're going to do about evaluation.
Yeah, love both those questions. Thank you very much. And one of the things we're doing for this year, obviously we've always met regularly with the central office with Case and Sabine, but one of the things we're doing this year, and I think it was on one of the slides, is we're going to have kind of review meeting. There's one in January and one in June. We've not circulated the dates yet because obviously we need to chat with the central office, but that will be an opportunity for, I guess, anyone who's interested, but hopefully for us to form a kind of a working group to help the development and longevity of the scheme. I think what you've suggested is brilliant, and I'm so glad Sabine has turned on her camera, because my suggestion was going to be, I will pass this to the central office, and as the administrating university we'd be absolutely delighted to share whatever information is necessary, but yeah, I think it would be fantastic. Sabine.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you to the whole team for this fantastic work that you have provided, and those improvements and all those resources and even the metrics to help the task team leaders. This is such a wonderful development. And to answer the question of Helena, yes, how do we mix the different initiatives? How do we connect them, and how can we document intercultural competence? And competence progression is exactly what we're trying to work on. And we had a previous meeting with the team, and the idea is to really embed the student scheme within the the competence framework within the student scheme. So I believe Case and maybe Kai, but at least Case will share the results of all of the competences that have been mapped for Aurora, and the performance descriptors, which help students reflect and position themselves in terms of intercultural openness or open-mindedness in general. There are several layers in there, and for the team to select what is most appropriate according to the wonderful feedback that they have collected as well from the student from last year, and to give the students this opportunity to reflect and document their learning and their acquisition with what has been developed by the groups. And in terms of who is participating in the demographics and how inclusive we are, we didn't touch upon that yet, but it's a fantastic question, and it's great that you were here today so that we can also reflect and connect the work from the different task team leaders and task teams in general, and see how we can be coherent in our overall approach. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, and I've made a thorough note, Helena and Sabine. I'll make sure we take that forward. Right, I'll just take a moment to respond to the questions that we've got here. So for the administering scheme, we will ensure that the students that are recruited are cascaded as widely as possible, but without bombarding too many people. So the full list will be made available to the Aurora Central Office. And as part of the application process, we seek students' permission to publish who they are. We use their first name, second name, and university email address. That's what we have their permission for. So those details will also be published on the Aurora web pages, and we will also send the full list to the institutional coordinators. We'll do that as swiftly as we can. As soon as we can, we will break that down per university. Depending on how many students apply, do just bear with us. But for ease, we might send everybody everything. But I'm sure the system, the applications will go into an Excel spreadsheet, so it'll be very easy to filter by university. Definitely, yes, these will come to the institutional coordinators, but you are not necessarily our main point of contact in terms of verifying the students. If they have a university email address, we can either take an assumption they're a bona fide student, or I'm very open to suggestions from the group. Sabine. Oh, you're just muted.
Thank you. Just to mention that the ambassadors are indeed a great resource for the universities themselves. And if some ICs are thinking of what could be done, I would also suggest that we reflect on what the ambassadors could do to promote their universities and be of use to some task teams. I'm thinking, for example, of the fantastic event that the plurilingualism group put together, and how Alma, our student president, presented her vision, her face, her voice for plurilingualism. And it could be interesting to promote local languages and plurilingualism, and the interest for students to be plurilingual in our century, to the rest of the Aurora community, so they could serve the Aurora values and in the institutions. They could also promote the institutions for other viewers through the vlog aspect, and they could also give all those wonderful resources to the task team dealing with plurilingualism. And Alex, you're well placed to know that the mobility group has worked also, made some great work for the promotion of mobility destinations of institutions with those webinars that are coming up soon. Probably as well promoting each institution as a study destination for an exchange, and giving it the Aurora flavor, and that would be of service to the mobility group as well. Excellent,
thank you very much. I think while Sabine was speaking, I was just reflecting on my own question. So what I might like to suggest in answer to will the institutional coordinators be the main point of contact for the scheme, it will be fantastic to have a representative within each university to whom we send questions if it is not the institutional coordinator. So speaking on behalf of my own university, it will be Tara Welsh, because she is our key contact for all things Aurora at UEA, who of course reports to our IC, but we will use Tara, I hope, to be our contact. I think it will be fantastic if, and we'll cascade this in our follow-up email, if we are not to cascade directly to the IC, who of course we will copy in, please let us know if you'd like it to be somebody else, who, if we're in any doubts about the valid student status of an applicant, we'll just take that approach. I hope everyone agrees with that. In terms of the upper limit, great question. So we have dared to leave this open this year, and if we are absolutely inundated, the administrative team will probably put our hands up to ask for some help, and everybody else will be absolutely delighted because there will be so much support. So we'll just have to see how it goes. I think last year we had 170 odd students register their interest. I think we had 60 or 70 students apply, and then we had 30 that were actively engaged. So on that basis, and the channels through which we are promoting the scheme at the moment, my fingers are crossed that we have between 10 and 100 students per institution. Let's see how it goes, and we'll follow up. I'll watch this recording back after the deadline and see if I've changed my mind. Yeah, if we can get a dozen students per university, I think that'll be fantastic. Thank you very much for the question on the Aurora ambassadors. Yes, this is a resource for your university to use, but yes, of course, please do use them in the Aurora activities you're engaged in, exactly as you've described in this fantastic question. Really, really helpful for clarifying. Thank you. I think for our staff perspective, we just want to be sure that we don't ask too much of our ambassadors, who have clearly said they've got a few ad hoc hours. So if we're getting them engaged, let's make sure it's realistic with their committed expectation. Conversely, champions, hopefully we'll have more champions this year, because it's not 40 hours, it's up to 40 hours. Those are the ones that we can hope to be connecting with throughout the entire academic year. Okay, with my eye on the clock, not seeing any more hands up for questions and none more popped in the chat, I think I'll start to wrap the session up. So just to remind you that we will be circulating a guide for helping Aurora University staff use our students, half in how to contact and connect with them, and half in the ways that we might use them. So hopefully you'll find that useful. That will of course accompany this presentation for those that you might like to cascade this to afterwards, and I'm sure we'll be making the presentation recording available through the Aurora central office, and hopefully this will be added to the web pages. Any questions, bear with us, because it's definitely going to start to get busy because students are going to apply. Brilliant. But do email us at aurora.champions@uea.ac.uk. Thanks so much for listening. Let's really make full use of this fantastic resource we have to help us this year. And on behalf of Tara, Callum and I, let's have a fantastic year and hopefully see you at the celebration event on the 1st of July next year, congratulating a fantastic cohort of students and the support they've given to Aurora this year. See you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Just we three then. Oh, I'm Eleanor. Was that okay, John? Thanks for your super suggestion.
Perfect. Yeah, great, Alex. Thanks a lot.
Fab.
You know
Great
what
to
I'd
see you.
really like to do? I'd like to, do you know what the bevy is? It's this psychometric test that we can use throughout Aurora to test students' attitudes.
Okay.
And lots of universities, what they do is they use it for students before they start an educational experience and after. And they measure how they've changed in terms of their open-mindedness and so on. And it would be sort of interesting to test this group.
Absolutely.
The only thing I suspect is that probably the sort of kids who sign up for this, they are already open-minded people, and they are already extremely socio-culturally, interested and so on. So I think that they'd probably represent a sort of elite in terms of, optimal student attitude.
Yeah.
But it would be really interesting to
Sounds
test.
great. We'll definitely look at that. And of course, these students have already put themselves forwards.
Yeah.
So perhaps there'll be, in some extent, that kind of cohort already anyway.
So what we will find when we do get the group profile, we'll probably find that. And in those cases, sometimes those groups, they don't actually improve
Progress that much. I
because
understand.
they're already exceptional, and the very fact that they presented them, I mean, that's the first filter. The first filter knocks out the sort of guys who actually would really benefit from doing this, but aren't brave enough to participate.
I see. Yeah.
But we've got that test. It's up and running in English.
Great. I'll definitely look into that. Thanks so much.
I can organise that whenever you like.
That would be fabulous. We will be in touch. Thanks a lot. Lovely to see you again today.
Cheers.
See
Bye.
ya.